Well, welcome to the FamilyLeader.com, and we have a special guest, very honored to welcome former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo back to the Family Leader. Thanks for being here.
Bob, it is fantastic to be back at Family Leader. Thanks for having me.
Well, you know, it's usually the Dutch guys who will go anywhere for a free lunch, but
this is my first stop in Iowa every time free lunch.
Every time free lunch, you're always welcome. When somebody of your stature, your prominence, comes into Iowa, we always have to ask a question: what are you doing in Iowa?
Yeah. It's a fair question. I came here today to help a couple of really talented conservative candidates, your current Secretary of Agriculture and your soon Congressman Zach Nunn. So we're doing political events. I'm going to go shoot some clays. That'll be fun. And then it's great to be at Family Leader too. It's always wonderful to be here. It regrounds me. My wife and I are people of faith. We love the Lord, and this is a place that's special to us as well.
Well, you talked about one of the hottest congressional races in the country, Zach Nunn versus Cindy Axne. And everything I see as I travel the country, that there is a wind behind the conservatives' back right now. They're seeing what's happening in D.C., but and to me, I don't think it's a wind. I think this could be like a tsunami coming. So how important are these midterm elections to our base?
This is really important stuff. It does feel that way to me as well. When I ran for Congress, the first time was the big class of 2010, where I think there were 70-something Republicans, brand new, all went to Washington, and we brought the country back. This was the time of Obamacare, when they were violating our most fundamental rights and stepping on our basic freedoms. I'm counting on this time to be the same. We've seen what the Biden administration is doing. We've seen what they've done. It's hard to find an American who is better off today than they were 20 months ago. So I think not only will we be successful in these elections, because I think the American people are going to want to reclaim their country, but I am very optimistic that we're going to elect really talented conservative believers who are going to do good work and actually execute and deliver on the things they're promising us today.
Well, you've been in Congress. You've been the director of CIA. You've also led the State Department as Secretary of State under President Trump for 4 years. And there's some of us who see we're going to take over the Congress. We're going to take back the U.S. House. We think we might have a shot at the U.S. Senate. But then some cynicism creeps in, like, but what will they do? From your perch where you've been, what would you recommend? If you guys take majority in the House, you take majority in the U.S. Senate, this is what you need to do immediately.
So I hear that cynicism. We shouldn't be cynical. We also shouldn't have unrealistic expectations about what's possible. When presidents are powerful, they have the ability to veto legislation, so that is all serious matter. But when I came in, we faced exactly the same thing. President Obama was there, but we then owned both the House and the Senate. What did we do? We began to go and peel back all that was going on so the American people could see it. Call it an investigation, call it inquiry, call them hearings. But we began to identify the shortcomings that our government was making their daily grist, so that when we were able to get a president elected, when President Trump got elected, the world could see it, America could see it. Second, don't underestimate the power when the House of Representatives passes a bill and the Senate sends it to the desk of the United States President. President Obama didn't want to put sanctions on the Iranians. There were many things he ultimately did. He did it because we were relentless about forcing the issue, making it a story that the American people could understand, and they came to see that they had to actually support that. Grudgingly, they'd sometimes take credit for it when they were really against it, but it is very important that we begin to repopulate Washington, D.C. with a group of people that understand what it is in America that is absolutely worth fighting for.
So you're highlighting and you're showcasing, the difference in leadership, and elections matter. And so we know elections matter in these midterms coming up. And we look back to 2020, and we see that elections matter, right? And so you take a look at all the stuff that's being unraveled in our country or being, forced down our throats in our country. When you take a look at the Biden administration, after serving in the Trump administration, what's one of the most consequential changes, reversals that this administration has done that you're like, that causes you grave concern?
Goodness, the list is pretty long, but I'll pick a couple. The first and most significant is what they are putting through the Department of Education into our schools all across of America. You might think as the Secretary of State I'd have identified something around the world, but no Secretary of State can succeed if the next generation of Americans doesn't understand our Judeo-Christian heritage and the greatness of America. And so the Biden administration has, through the teachers unions, right, they closed the schools. They kept kids out of school for a couple years. Then they went and attacked parents who were doing nothing more than trying to make sure they knew what their kids were learning. The Trump administration had a fundamentally different view of who was responsible for the education of the next generation. We knew it was parents. We knew it was local communities and local school boards, and not some knucklehead at the Department of Education. You know, around the world, really, the thing that they've changed is that we're not respected. So it's not a particular policy, it is an understanding. Bob, you know this. We didn't make friends everywhere we went. Mm-hmm. We were asking the Europeans to do more to defend themselves. We were demanding that Japan defend itself. But they respected us, and they knew we were serious. And they knew that if we committed to help them, if they got in trouble, that we'd actually be there. And that led to one of our signature achievements, where we got 4 countries to recognize the right of the nation of Israel to exist. Amen. We called them the Abraham Accords, but the importance was Iran was the bad actor there, and our friend were the Jewish people rightfully occupying the nation of Israel. Right? Seems basic. You and I would say, well, what's of course, but this was not American policy, and we flipped it on its head, and we moved our embassy. We acknowledged that the Golan Heights belonged to Israel. I traveled to Judea and Samaria, the first Secretary of State ever to go to Judea and Samaria. This is Israel. This is the biblical homeland of the Jewish people, and important to Christian faith as well. And they've upended that. And now the Gulf Arab states are upset with us. The Israelis don't trust us, and the Iranians are richer. That's a bad combination for the people of Iowa.
Well, first of all, thank you on so many levels there, especially for standing with the nation of Israel, the Abraham Accords, moving the embassy to Jerusalem. When we traveled to Israel, our delegation went to that embassy.
Isn't that beautiful?
It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And administration after administration after administration said they were going to do it and never did it. But you guys actually did it.
Credit President Trump for that. He campaigned on it. He got it done. I give him all credit.
But then you went to Judea and Samaria, and I believe you received the invitation to go to Judea and Samaria at a dinner after one of our leadership summits.
That is exactly right. It was truly remarkable. It was remarkable in 2 respects, Bob. The first was to be there is just really special. I've had a chance to go back a few times to see Shiloh, to see Hebron, to see important Christian and Jewish sites that are in Judea and Samaria. But what was really surprising to me was how controversial it was. Massive protests, huge security, all to travel to this place that if you pick your Bible up, we all know exactly who we actually we know what's there. We know the history. And it was a really special trip. I had on that very trip, I had a wine named after me. It's crazy. There's now wine with a Pompeo name on it.
I've had a little bit of that.
The folks who made the wine said they sell a lot because it says Pompeo and they think it's Italian. So
it ends in a vowel.
In any event, it's special only because the recognition of what America did. They did it because now they can sell their product and say made in Israel. And it all seems so basic, but so important on so many levels. And I was proud to be a part of making that happen.
So a comment that you made is people didn't always agree with you. I mean, other leaders didn't always agree, but they respected you. Putin and Ukraine. You know, I don't want to get into all the details about this. What do you do with a guy like Vladimir Putin?
Yeah. I think the first rule when you're dealing with someone like him is you just have to acknowledge who he is. If you pretend it's different, you get yourself in real trouble. And I think the administration did that. I always remind myself, so President Obama called ISIS the JV, right?
I remember that.
Right, so he said they were the junior varsity terrorists. They weren't like Al-Qaeda. And then they took over a state the size of the United Kingdom, and we had to go crush their caliphate when we took power. Vladimir Putin is the same. He believes in greater Russia. He thinks Ukraine is part of Russia. He thinks Sweden and Finland are part of Russia. He believes that in his heart. Second, he's evil, unmitigated evil. And third, he's a pretty savvy character. And while he made a massive strategic mistake in this case, it didn't go well, we shouldn't underestimate his continued effort to destroy the lives of people all across the world. And the fact that he doesn't care about human life is something that's hard for Westerners to understand. And so their mistake was he didn't fear them. Reagan always talked about deterrence. We delivered that too. And when we left, Putin's calculus, his math said, well, I think I can run over these folks.
This is an opportunity.
This is an opportunity. The risk is now perceived as being lower. Yeah. I'm going to go complete the task that he began in 2014 when President Obama was in office, right? Remember, he takes a fifth of Ukraine in 2014, and then none of Ukraine while we were there, and then goes back at it a few months later. Someone said to me the other day, it was just a coincidence. Perhaps. I think the Lord I think the Lord works differently than that, and I know Vladimir Putin respects power.
And that all goes back to elections matter. We want to thank you for your leadership on the international stage and in the Trump administration. You have a new book coming out, and I can't wait to read it, to be quite honest with you. It's Never Give an Inch. Tell me why the title. What are some stories? Why would we want to read this? And then when's it coming out?
So the book will be out in January. It's now done. I finally finished it. I've got it cleared by CIA and state, so we've run all the hurdles. It is ready to go. It's called Never Give an Inch because those of us who believe in our founding ideas and those of us who understand that our rights come from our Creator have sometimes rounded corners. And my observation is that when you begin to round corners on things that really matter, you and I can compromise on, do you want to stand here or here? This is all fine. But on the things that matter, when you give an inch, you have walked away from the principle. And when we walk away from the principle, bad things follow. The subtitle of the book is Fighting for the America I Love. And those are connected. The America I love understands individual liberty and freedom. It understands the capacity of people to worship in the way they choose, or if they choose not to, so be it. Mm-hmm. It understands that the family is the foundation of civilization. That's the America I love. And so we were fighting for those very principles every day. And there are some great stories in the book. Former CIA directors get great stories. I got most of them through. And they're lovely because they tell the story of the team. The team that we built in the Trump administration that was working every day with an eye towards how do we make lives better for every American. And so it's fun. It's not. There's 13, 14 Trump books out. It's not gossipy in that same way. So I'm sure New York Times won't like it as much. But it does tell a story. And last piece of it, why it was important to me to write as well, was that no one's written that history yet. I was the only senior national security official to be there the entire 4 years. And no one from outside is going to write the true story of what it is and why we did it and the things we got wrong and why I think they didn't work. And then those things that I think were successful and we ought to build on as we move forward.
And it comes out when?
Comes out in January. You can buy it now, MikePompeo.com, but you can get a real hard copy in your hands like I like to read them in early January.
So Never Give an Inch. You guys want to get your hands on that. And again, go to MikePompeo.com. You'll want to read the stories. And I know threaded through that book of Never Give an Inch, and you highlighted that a little bit here already, but your faith is very important to you. And obviously, we're a Christian ministry at the Family Leader. Our faith is very important to us. How did your faith play a role when you're giving these insurmountable roles of CIA director, Secretary of State, and maybe can you share a story when you knew this is above my pay grade?
Oh, yes. Many times. Even taking those jobs on, my wife and I would pray knowing this was bigger than we were. We had to go work, we had to toil, we had to try and get it right and be informed and smart and capable and honest. But we needed his help. And so I prayed every day. It informed everything I did, Bob. I get asked this all the time, like you're the Secretary of State for the United States of America, and yet you're an evangelical Christian. How do you mesh those two? It's kind of a silly question to me because everything I do is informed by my understanding of what it is that Jesus instructs us to do, right? It informs everything that I do every day. And it's not that I don't make mistakes and get things wrong. Goodness knows my wife would tell you I am an authentic Christian. I have my moments. But you can't separate the two. It's like I'm going to go do my government job and then I'm going to go do my job for the Lord. For me, these were of a apart, and it drove the New York Times nuts. There's a couple great headlines. One was mockingly, it says, we shouldn't worry about Vladimir Putin. Mike Pompeo is an evangelical nut job. And then I got it a little wrong, but it's very close to that. The other one was Mike Pompeo, God's diplomat, which of course on my epitaph, I'd take that.
Oh yeah,
right?
amen.
Like, it was meant. The article doesn't read that way, but and you know I remember so many times I would walk in. So I was often in the Middle East working on the Abraham Accords, or when we were trying to convince the Taliban to behave. You're sitting across from people who aren't Christian. You're sitting across from Muslims, who they are of the Abrahamic tradition, but they have a very different view of this than we do. And I would always take a moment before I walked in and just pray to make sure that I was doing my duty appropriately.
Well, let me ask you a question. When you walked into some of those meetings, especially with the Abraham Accords, and you're dealing with leaders from the Muslim community, Muslim nations, because they knew you were an evangelical, did they trust you more or less?
Oh, that's a great question. Easy. More. Far more. I'll give you a story that proves this. I was in Cairo. I'd wanted to go give this speech. You'll remember President Obama goes to Cairo and gives what became known as the apology speech, the apology tour. And I was secretary, said I could go to Cairo and give the other speech, and I wanted to do that. So we get it all set up. And I'm drafting the remarks in the weeks up to it. And it keeps, I had as the very first line, I had, Mike, I am an evangelical Christian, as the opening line of this speech in Cairo. And it was very intentional. The speech writing team would like mark it out, and it'd come back. And finally I bring the team up and I said, I want to do this because I think it's important that they know where my values come from. And so you can go read the speech or listen to the speech online. I received more positive feedback from the Islamic world from that speech than any other thing I did during my entire time. And they're of a kind. They say, Mike, we had enormous respect for the fact that you would come to our place, tell us who you were, and that you are disciplined in your faith. They admire that. They understand the differences. Yeah. And so I always think it's really important for all of us in every walk of life, whether you're the Secretary of State or you're a teacher, I think it's important that people come to know who you are, what are the values that drive you, and then we can have good, candid conversations.
And if you're hiding that, there has to be a distrust immediately.
100%.
Like, why would they be hiding that? If I come out clean with it, it's now I can trust him because I know where he's operating from.
You got it exactly right.
So thank you for, I'm going to ask you a question. I just had this conversation with somebody that I greatly respect, and his answer really kind of, startled me a little bit. But I'm just going to ask you, when our founders said the laws of nature and nature's God, what does that mean to you?
Oh my goodness, they're speaking the language that you and I know. This is the language that says that all who we are and all that is because of God, and you can read about it. There's the Bible teaches us this, and so every human being is governed and regulated by this central idea, and every right that we have comes from Him, and it is His grace that gives us the capacity to know Him and love Him, and will ultimately redeem us. Wherever you are, wherever you find yourself, that is universally true.
And so what we see is if it's the law of nature and nature's God, in my opinion, we understand there is a God.
Yes.
And we are not Him. We're endowed by our Creator, right?
In all that we have and all that we do. The flip side of this, I think you and I have talked about this, the flip side of this is not good, right? The flip side of this is a atheistic understanding of chaos, ungoverned by this central understanding of the Lord as our Savior. Yeah.
And when
it's really important that we all get this right, and that America get this right.
And when we lose that framework of the laws of nature and nature's God, pretty soon you could have a Supreme Court justice who cannot answer what's a woman.
Imagine that.
But
hypothetically.
When you start unraveling that. So let me ask you, and I hope this isn't setting you up question, but I'm telling you, we represent thousands of supporters around the state, and a lot of them that were networked throughout the country. Your name comes up a lot to me about running for president in 2024. Now, I know you're not going to make an announcement here, and quite frankly, I'd advise you not to make an announcement here. But would you consider that? What would go into your consideration for that? And frankly, why would you do that? I mean, when you look at that job, you go, why would anybody
Yeah.
want that job, right?
The why question is a good one, but there's a decent answer to that as well. The reason one would pursue something like that is because you truly believe that you can make a difference in the lives of the American people, and that you can continue the greatness of this nation that I think the Lord is watching over, and you can potentially be a small part of continuing that very important place that America finds itself. I think that's the why. As for the Pompeos, when I say we, it's Susan and me, my wife, that will ultimately have to make this decision. We are thinking about it. We're praying that the Lord will give us the wisdom, the discernment to figure our way through whether this is the right time and the right thing for us to do to advance His kingdom here and America. And in a few months, we'll have to sort our way through it because, as I joked the other day, if I go down an escalator, nobody cares. We will come to Iowa, New Hampshire, and to America and make the case for why Mike Pompeo would be ought to be the next president, and then the good people of America will get to sort their way through that. And so I pray that we get to the right decision about that, and that this fight, the thing that I wrote about and spoke about, this fight for America is going to be something Susan and I do forever, whether we re-enter public life in that way or not. At this point, only the Lord knows.
Well, I know it'll be a joint decision because you guys jointly taught fifth grade Sunday school together, right?
We did, Bob. We were co-teachers at fifth grade Sunday school, which was the best preparation for being the Secretary of State of the United States you can imagine.
Well, I'm just going to end with a couple of questions. One question is, Darla and I just spoke at a thing on Wednesday night here in the Des Moines community, and some people came up to us and they gave us great remarks on our message, those types of things. But then this guy just lamented about how divided we are as a country. And it seems like no matter where you go today, there's division, there's chaos. It doesn't matter, where it is. You go to the NFL, which used to be, I'm just watching football, or go to your Thanksgiving dinner here pretty soon. And it's like, there's division there too. Where do you see the hope that we can bring us together, the United States of America?
I'm optimistic about this. I hear this too. I remind people, we've always been a pretty rambunctious nation, even since the founding. There were hard-fought battles. Even then, we kind of think of our time as the most difficult. And
sure.
We just remember democracies.
Watch Hamilton, huh?
Yes, watch Hamilton. Democracies are messy in the moment, and that's actually okay. But it needs to be cabined by an understanding that we are Americans. We're all in this. And so I think there's a couple things. I think leaders have a real role in this. And I don't just mean presidents and members of Congress. Faith leaders, business leaders, coaches of soccer teams, leaders in every place, fathers, mothers, families, to speak about those with whom they disagree with the respect that they deserve. Doesn't mean you can't. I can throw bombs with the best of them, right? Mm-hmm. But to use language which creates the space where you can have a real conversation and disagree violently about what matters most, but respect the other person's capacity to continue to have that debate. When you do that, I think America wins enormously, and it will create the space. We're not going to convince everyone to think about America the way that I think about America, but boy, you can create some real space where the edges, the things that have the risk of fraying the republic are lessened and rounded in ways that actually really matter.
So when you bring it back to the family leader, we want to inspire the church to engage God's institution of government, not for a candidate or a party, but really to advance His kingdom. And we believe the ripple effect through that will be electing ministers of God in Romans 13. We believe they'll be about advancing righteous policy, Matthew 6:33, and that there's a real biblical partnership between the church and government where we can really meet communities' needs. Would that be helpful?
I depended on it. I counted on it, and I benefited from it. Every place. The family leader, there are other great groups doing remarkable work. They were an important part of not only what I did, but to your point earlier about people mattering, if you think about the team, think about your team, leadership team here in Iowa, right? A great team of leaders. They bring people around them that are also people who understand America in the same way or the state of Iowa in the same way. Right, we had Vice President Pence, Ben Carson, Alex Azar, none of whom were chosen because they were evangelical Christians, but all of whom were chosen because their worldview was the same and they supported this understanding of advancing the kingdom in America. These things matter, and we were always heartened by the fact that we had groups like the Family Leader out there who were helping us think through very complicated policy matters, how best to advance them and achieve them. But second, when it really got tough, when there were difficult times, we knew we're out there praying for our continued efforts and our continued success.
And we definitely are doing that. Final thoughts to our audience.
Yeah, I'd close right where you just were headed. There's lots of challenges. We can talk about the problems posed by the Chinese Communist Party, by the extreme left who want to undermine our families. All of those are real challenges confronting our country. We should not underestimate them. But I'm deeply long America. I am convinced that this experiment still got another 250 good years, in large measure because of places like this, where people come together to be part of community, to drive this process forward in a way that reflects well on our nation and well on our Savior. I see it everywhere I go. I've been out these last 19 months all over the country. It's been a lot of fun, but it's also been joyous because I can see the greatness of America. It's not gone. It is not lost. We need to gather together as the Bible teaches us to do in our communities and in our families. And when we do that, good things are going to happen.
Well, we echo that hope and your comments. You're always welcome back to Iowa. You're always welcome back to the Family Leader. You've got a friend in this neighborhood.
Bless you.
Thank you to Mike Pompeo.
Thank you very much.
God bless.
Thank you.